please take it away.
All right, good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the City of Tucson Planning Commission. My name is Anna Cassidy and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. The responsibilities of this body are to advise the mayor and council and the Planning and Development Services Department on the adoption of long-range plans, policies, specific plans, and regulations that affect land use and development. Will staff call the roll, please?
Chair Cassidy.
Here.
Vice Chair Willett.
Here.
Commissioner Zajir, absent. Commissioner Martin, absent. Commissioner Pafford.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
I'm here.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino.
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Warake.
Here.
Commissioner Lane. I think she's here, but I don't know if she has audio right now. We're going to move on. I'm going to say present for now. Commissioner Kinney. Here. And Commissioner Lampo.
Jason McCancy's here too.
Commissioner McCancy.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So agenda item number 2 is the approval of the minutes legal action report for April 19th. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the legal action report for April 19th.
Chair Cassidy, I'll go ahead and move to approve the minutes from last month.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the legal action report for April 19th, say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Agenda item number 3 is Smoke Shop Unified Development Code Amendment. Would staff please provide your presentation for item number 3?
Wonderful, thank you so much. My name is Carver Struve. For those of you who have not yet met me, I am with the Planning and Development Services Department, and I am here to go over the Smoke Shop UDC amendment that we have been working on developing. A little bit of background on this. On February 7th, 2023, Mayor and Council directed staff to develop the code amendment for smoke shops. This was requested due to some concerns that Mayor and Council had about clustering of smoke shops, as well as the impacts that smoke shops may have on youth in the community as a whole. In order to get started on this, staff researched potential regulations in other communities, including those that had separation distances between other smoke shops or sensitive uses. We, in order to first take this apart, needed to look at what exactly a smoke shop entailed. And so we developed a definition of a smoke shop and then land use standards to address the concerns that Mayor and Council had brought up. These specifically were to require smoke shops to be separated from one another and from sensitive uses, as I mentioned. And noting also that as we go through this code amendment would apply to new uses only. Existing legal smoke shops would become legally non-conforming or grandfathered, just like any other use in a zoning change. And so when we developed this definition, we first of all noted that smoke shops are currently addressed as a general retail use in the UDC, so they are treated as any other general retail. Looking at that, because of the impacts, we realized that a new land use class needed to be developed for smoke shops. We then worked on developing a definition. We had a couple of different iterations of the definition, but ultimately landed on a definition that was based on language that's already contained within the tobacco retail establishments section of the Tucson Code. This was for consistency and for clarity with other documents that the city has adopted. So once we knew what smoke shops were, differentiating between, let's say, gas station that's selling cigarettes versus a smoke shop where the retail establishment's purpose is to sell tobacco or tobacco-related products, then we were able to pull out where those are in the city and conduct a geospatial analysis of existing smoke shops and how they relate to those sensitive uses within the city. So, excuse me. So we then were able to conduct this analysis. We looked at different setback requirements and different options that we could apply to the location of smoke shops, keeping in mind that we're not wanting to actually eliminate the smoke shops, but we do want to, provide where we're mitigating the impacts of the smoke shops. To eliminate them would be something that's probably not going to be acceptable through zoning. So we ran through a whole bunch of scenarios and we landed on 2 to put forward for some community outreach. Option 1 was to separate smoke shops a distance of 500 feet from schools and 500 feet from other smoke shops. Option 2 was to separate smoke shops a distance of 1,000 feet from schools and other smoke shops. And again, this is really, we sought to strike a balance here, providing adequate parcels for smoke shops, but also making sure that we're limiting the impacts that they had on the community. And so when we did this analysis, we mapped these 2 scenarios. This is the 500-foot scenario. You can see on here that the dark blue and the red dots are where the dark blue is smoke shops within the city, and the red dots are smoke shops that are within separation distances of 500 feet from either a school or another smoke shops. And so those red dots would become non-conforming under this 500-foot proposal. It's sort of interesting when you look at that, you start to see a couple of areas where clustering is occurring in certain parts of the city. But you also can see on here with the orange property line areas, those are all the parcels within the city where you could conceivably permit a smoke shop should this particular scenario be adopted. And so under this scenario, we're looking at about a quarter of existing smoke shops would become non-conforming. And you would also still have about 85% of the city's commercial parcels available for a future smoke shop. Keep in mind, this is essentially hypothetical. It would be available. This has nothing to do with, is the land available? Could it meet code, anything like that? It's simply, we were looking at the number of commercial parcels inside or outside of these separation distances. So then we moved on and did the same analysis for 1,000 feet from either schools or other smoke shops. In this instance, we obviously see more smoke shops that are coming into nonconformity. You also see that the clustering becomes a bit more pronounced of smoke shops that are within proximity of other smoke shops. It's generally in the same areas, it's just a bit broader. So under this scenario, about 50% of the smoke shops within the city would become non-conforming, and the available parcels where you could put a smoke shop is still relatively high, but is reduced to approximately 60% of all the commercial parcels within the city. So armed with this information, we then went ahead and set up an outreach meeting for the community. This was conducted by Zoom on June the 27th of this year. We made an effort to bring in smoke shop owners as well as people in advocacy organizations, school officials, American Lung Association, similar organizations like that, neighborhood organizations. We actually sent out a mailing to all of the smoke shop owners within the city that were identified in our analysis. We didn't have email necessarily, so we just sent a mailing. We also reached out through board offices, through emails to other officials or community organizations, just to try to get as broad of a cross-section as we could for this discussion. So we had approximately 50 people in attendance for this meeting. We went through the pros and cons of each of these scenarios. There was a strong preference voiced for the 1,000-foot setback separation distance scenario out of the two. And we received a lot of comments about further regulation of smoke shops that's beyond the scope of zoning. So some examples of that were regulation of hours of operation, regulation of consumption, such as hookah lounges, background investigations for employees of smoke shops, advertising for smoke shops that would treat that differently than other types of advertising, policing of illegal activities, etc. So all of those comments we did hear, but those were things which, because of this is a code amendment and not something, or a zoning amendment and not something broader or different, it's really not the appropriate place to do that kind of regulation. I also will note that the definition of smoke shops that we presented at that particular meeting was different than what we've got now. We had gotten some feedback on the complexity of that definition, or some of the potential enforcement difficulties with that definition. So that continued to evolve as well, following the feedback that we received. I'll also note that throughout this whole project, because business services will be involved in the implementation, I'll get to that in a little bit, we've been coordinating with them throughout the entire process, making sure that that department is aware of what we're doing, and we have their buy-in as we continue to develop this code amendment. So next slide, we'll talk about what is the definition of smoke shop. And this is what we landed on, is smoke shop means any establishment in which the sales or display of storage of tobacco products consists of 15% or more of the product display, sales, or storage of the space. So we're essentially establishing this 15% threshold that would put you over the line of what is a smoke shop versus what is a retailer who happens to sell tobacco or tobacco products. We are mentioning tobacco products in this definition. There's a rather lengthy definition of tobacco products within the Tucson code, which has some regulations for tobacco retail as well. So we took that same definition because we want to make sure that that's consistent, but at the same time, we didn't want to reference a different set of code and in case there were some changes. So basically, we took that definition. It's essentially any product derived from tobacco or that contains nicotine and is intended for human consumption or is likely to be consumed, whether smoked, heated, chewed, absorbed, dissolved, inhaled, or ingested by any other means. And it goes on like that for quite some time. But I want to emphasize that the reason that we included that was so that there's no ambiguity about what we're talking about, so that if there are any enforcements, we're clear on that. So from there, we got into code amendments, and it got a little bit more complicated than usual for a UDC amendment here, because we're actually looking at primarily a UDC amendment, but also a very minor amendment to the Tucson code as part of this, in order to streamline enforcement and ensure that smoke shops are in fact being compliant when they get business licenses from the city. So what we did is, under the UDC, we defined and allowed a new land use class called smoke shops in all commercial zones and in the mixed use zone. So we took what is your general retail class and we just created a new smoke shop definition and class for those zones. So they're essentially still permitted in the same areas where they were as general retail. We then also established use-specific standards for these. These included the minimum separation distances. We are recommending 1,000 feet from schools and other smoke shops based on the feedback that we received at our outreach meeting. But then we're going on and taking this other small step of amending the Tucson code to require specifically that a zoning compliance letter be provided to business services prior to the issuance of a business license for smoke shops. This is simply to ensure that if you have smoke shops that are, kind of coming and going more informally, that there is a check on that to make sure that they are being evaluated to make sure that they would comply with these new zoning standards before they were able to operate with a business license. The red line ordinance that we developed, which includes all of this for both the Tucson Code and the Unified Development Code, is within your packet. So if you want to take a look at that, feel free, or if you probably already have. And if you have any questions, please let us know on that. And so based on all of that analysis, staff recommends to the Planning Commission that you approve a motion to set a smoke shop code amendment for public hearing on September 13th, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Carver. I'll open this up for any questions from the commission of staff related to this item. Are there any questions? Vice Chair Willett, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Cassidy. Thanks, Carver, for that great presentation. Question for you. Has there been any consideration or enforcement on lighting of smoke shops? Because there are several smoke shops that have recently popped up, I know on the Campbell corridor, Fort Lowell, that have rather bright lights that, you know, shine through the building itself. And curious, has there been any consideration on, you know, a regulation of those, because it's kind of bright, if you will.
So is this interior lighting that is shining out onto the street? We have not looked into that, but we can certainly go back and look into that. I'll look at the outdoor lighting code and see if that addresses it at all. And if not, we'll take that apart and see what if anything can be done on that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, because I know there's a big example like on Campbell that just went in just north of Grant, and that one is really like you drive down Grant or up towards Grant on Campbell, and it's quite impressive of just the lights. And I've seen a few others across the city start to implement a similar tactic, I think, to attract people to the business, if you will. But it is kind of, I don't know, it's much brighter than any of the lights on our streets or anything like that. So just curious if there was a consideration for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but just related to that, Vice Chair Willett. A lot of those issues are related to either the sign code or related to the outdoor lighting code. So we'll definitely take a look at those regulations. I have a feeling it might just be an enforcement issue. But yes, I've also seen some of those very bright signs that are located out there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like the interior lights, the signage, everything of the matter. So I'd really appreciate if you guys could look at that. Thank you.
Certainly.
Commissioner McKenzie? Oh, you're muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Excuse me.
There.
Just a point of interest, that smoke shop Ms. Willett is referring to is right across the street from my neighborhood. But I've got a couple of questions. One is, did I read the wording in the amendment correctly, in that not only do smoke shops have to be 1,000 feet away from a school, but also 1,000 feet away from each other? And if the latter, you know, why are we concerned about that?
Certainly, that is correct. The proposed amendment includes 1,000 feet separation distance from schools as well as other smoke shops. This came out of communication from mayor and council, and also some communication that we received from TPD during the outreach process, where they're concerned about, with clustering, that illegal activities may or may not occur around the smoke shops if they are close together. So they feel that breaking them up would have a public interest.
Okay, good point. The other question is, in some of the comments from the public hearing, I noticed that people had asked, what about some other, you know, facilities similar to schools, such as childhood centers, and I thought about youth centers, parks where youth gather, swimming pools, that type of thing. So why are we limiting this to just schools?
So the issue with the child care centers or daycare centers that we looked at specifically was that we didn't believe that you could make the case that a separation distance would actually be rationally related to the use of tobacco products. To put it another way, we don't believe that children in a daycare center are going to go out and buy cigarettes at a smoke shop. So it would be very difficult to enforce that particular separation distance We certainly had discussions about parks. We felt like there may be some difficulty in enforcing, again, what's in a park versus tying it directly back to concerns about children leaving school and going straight to a smoke shop. That was one, though, that, again, we looked at a couple of different scenarios and believed that the two simpler scenarios in terms of the separation distances from other smoke shops as well as schools was going to get the most bang for the buck.
Okay, thank you. And finally, how was the 15% of product display figure arrived at? I'm just curious.
No, that's a very good question. We certainly went over that a number of times. Where we started with that was when we looked at other jurisdictions. Most of them had a percentage in their definition as well. It really tended to run from 10 to 20% depending on the definition. So that's just a little bit of context of where these things tend to be. But then we also started looking at, if you have a Circle K or like a smaller gas station where they're going to have a wall of tobacco products in the back, those aren't the type of uses that we're regulating here or trying to regulate here. And so we wanted to make sure that we provided something that had a number that would not catch them up in this definition, but at the same time was, low enough that a smoke shop would have difficulty operating, if they below that 15%.
Fine. Thank you very much for those answers. That was a very clear presentation. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Commissioner Lampo.
Hi, and thanks for that presentation. That was very informative. I had a few questions, and Commissioner McKenzie, I would also like to echo the concern about daycares and parks. A suggestion would be, you mentioned that it would be hard to determine which parcels. So maybe you could just look at city-owned parks for the distance separation. But that brings up one of my other questions is, how is the distance separation? How is that measured? Is that lot line to lot line, or is that building to building?
I would have to look at the red line code. It is defined in there exactly what that looks like. If you can bear with me, I will pull that up.
Here, Carver, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's from property line. The closest property line of the school to the wall of the smoke shop is essentially what it says. So it would be property line to the wall. I also want to just mention, related to the parks, and part of the reason why the parks didn't make it into the proposal. One is that, mayor and council did direct us to look at, the schools and the separation distance for clustering. But additionally, we did a lot of other analyses related to this prior to going to kind of our community meeting. And we were trying to be really careful to balance the amount of regulation versus the amount of regulation they were putting on it. We wanted to address what mayor and council wanted to do, but we didn't want to add so many regulations that we basically prohibited the use. And when you start to do so, it really limits the amount of places where these can locate. So again, it was really a balancing thing. We're happy to bring back a map or some analyses, if you'd like, related to parks or something of that sort.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I guess that brings up my next question is, has the state codified any statutes related to separation requirements, or is it fully up to the municipalities to determine time, place, and manner regulations? Have they provided any guidance whatsoever that you've seen? I looked, I couldn't find anything.
So yeah, Commissioner Lampo, there aren't any. That's the reason why we didn't really have any distinction in our code prior to this between a general retail use and smoke shops. And if you look elsewhere in the state, there are municipalities that regulate it like we do currently, and then there's other ones that also regulate smoke shops separately. I will say most of those were put in place prior to Proposition 207. So it's another thing that we have to kind of be careful about as we make those regulations, to where we're not being too heavy-handed, to where we're creating a Proposition 207 issue.
Okay.
in the state.
So the last question I have is, maybe we're a little bit too early in the process for this, but I'm just curious to know, this is sort of a multi-part question. So for one, did someone go out, were there field studies? How was it determined that each of those geospatial points was an existing smoke shop? And I guess, the other question I have is just related to how they will move forward. So a new smoke shop, how will that application look like? Will they need to get some sort of letter verifying that they're compliant with that distance separation in the future?
Certainly. So how we identified which smoke shops where those were located is that we queried the city's business license database to identify which ones were coded as that. We then had to go through those, since this is general retail, and do a bit of a manual analysis based on the names of the establishments. We were doing some verification with Google Street View particularly, or also looking at sometimes map Tucson as well, to feel like we felt like we were actually in a pretty good place with that though. So once we had that, we were able to feel confident that that was a set aside. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
So the second part is mostly related to how will an applicant actually go in for approval? Will they need to get some sort of letter verifying from PDSD that yes, they are at least 1,000 feet away from a school?
Yes.
Or another smoke shop.
Absolutely, and that's part of what we're working into this process. So they will go in and they will apply for a building permit. PDSD will evaluate that they meet the separation requirements on the ordinance. They need to have a business license from the city then to open. And so business licensing will require that they provide a document from PDSD stating that they meet the requirements.
Perfect. That answered all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I guess my question pertains to conditions around these smoke shops and why they are being regulated, and based on the background in the memo to the Planning Commission, looks like this was as a result of presentation from the Liberty Partnership Keno Neighborhoods Council. And now I haven't done my homework, I suppose, to go back and look at that council meeting and see that presentation. I will like to do that prior to the public hearing. But I'm wondering if there is any like crime data. You said you reached out to TPD to discuss the effects of smoke shops. And I'm wondering what the data is saying about crime and the types of crime in the areas around these smoke shops.
I know that TPD has expressed concerns about crime in and around the smoke shops. That was part of their feedback on our proposal as well. We didn't pull specific crime data to show if there was a higher prevalence right around smoke shops, and it might be a situation too where that may vary depending on the smoke shop. But the presentation was useful in the sense, it was very informative to me that they did show how marketing for all of these different tobacco products are really geared toward children. Very different from when I was coming up. A lot of the vaping products look like candy. They're brightly colored. They are really intended to appeal to younger people. And so that was where a lot of mayor and council's concern grew out of, was specifically protecting young people who, granted, they're not of age to buy tobacco products, but when you look at the marketing, there still appears to be a very strong focus on that.
Yeah, additionally, Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, we'll try to reach out to TPD to get some of that data. I'm sure they have it, and try to bring that back to you when we come back for the public hearing.
Awesome. I love data.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, kind of following along the lines of Commissioner Ortiz-Pino. Is there any evidence that smoke shops near schools increase youth smoking? I just sometimes I feel like this is really tenuous. I mean, you know, there are gas stations next to schools that sell cigarettes and tobacco products. The age to buy tobacco now is what, 21 in Tucson. So I'm maybe wrong about that, but you know, I just, if we're going to say that this is about kids and smoking, I'd love to see a little more data about that. It just seems a little tenuous to me.
Certainly, and that's where I believe that the presentation at Mayor Council was helpful for me to understand the data there. And again, I believe that part of why we're doing this is because that was the direction that Mayor and Council provided to us, was to ensure that we were protecting or providing the separation distances between schools and the existing smoke shops. I don't know, Dan, if you had anything to add.
Just kind of similar to Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, we'll go back and take a look at those specific materials from the mayor and council from presentation. I believe there are some specifics related to kind of that correlation between schools and tobacco use and that type of thing. So we will make sure we focus on that and kind of present that to you when we come back.
I just also think that if we're concerned about youth smoking and there are smoke shops or any establishment that's selling tobacco products to minors, it's really about enforcing the laws that already exist that are about smoking and the age. So that's why I bring that up.
Certainly.
Commissioner Warake.
Hi, hello. Yes, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if there's any other example where this separation distance language is used in the UDC to prevent this clustering and regulate it.
There are examples in the Tucson code that establish separation distances, and then within the UDC, the one that comes to mind are marijuana dispensaries as well, where they provide slightly different arrangements for distances, but it's the same concept.
And to follow up, just out of curiosity, is it used for liquor stores as well, or?
I believe it is, but I don't know for certain. I haven't really dealt with any liquor store zoning issues since I've been here, so I can't say 100%. But
yeah, Commissioner Warake, yeah, so that's generally done at the state level. It's, I believe, 300 feet from schools. And it's again, slightly different language than what we have in the Unified Development Code.
Commissioner Kinney.
Thank you, Chair Cassidy, and Carver. I want to say thank you. This is a very nice presentation, very thorough, so well done. I'll be brief. Dan mentioned that you wanted to tailor this so that it would not become a complete prohibition on the use. Looking at the geospatial analysis that you provided, it's showing that about 50% of existing smoke shops would become non-conforming. That's very high. That was pretty surprising. And while it is true, like you said, I can't remember the exact percentage, it is true that there is still a certain percentage of commercial area in the city that would be available for smoke shops. I think there's a reason why they are where they are. If you look at the map, almost all of them are on major streets and major roads. Most of them are at major intersections, which are probably large retail centers. So they're there for a reason. So I think that this might actually become effectively close to a prohibition. So, it's not really up to us, I don't think, to opine on the wisdom of mayor and council's direction, but I want to be clear that is a potential outcome of this, unintended or intended, and maybe we could triple check, particularly where my mind is on the legal side, to make sure that wouldn't be effectively a full prohibition, so that the city is covered if we do this.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino, you had another question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cassidy. I wanted to kind of follow up on Commissioner Kinney's question there and statement. and two parts is, I know, and apologize if you said this and I missed it, but I know that owners of smoke shops and they were participants in the public outreach. What was their feeling? What was their comment on the proposed amendment?
So it was interesting to see how things went in the meeting. We provided both an opportunity to comment during the session and then also a link to provide written comments after the session. We only got about 4 written comments after, but there was a lot of discussion from the sort of smoking elimination advocacy people on the call. A lot of the smoke shops, I'm generalizing here because there was some exchange, but a lot of the smoke shop owners were more observing, it appeared to me during the discussion. There are some points where they did speak up, particularly when it came around to a discussion about the background checks for people working at the store. You know, they want to clarify that's not really what this is set out to do, but it was interesting in the sense that they did not engage a whole lot in the discussion.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, on what Commissioner Kinney said, is that despite a lot of available zoning parcels to smoke shops, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would be financially feasible locations for those shops. Sure. And so I think I echo his opinion that it could amount to a prohibition, depending on how this vote goes.
Certainly, and we'll work with legal on that to make sure that everything is aligned.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Willett, you have another question?
Thanks, Chair Cassidy. I appreciate it. And this might be revealed when we get some more of the data presented in the next in the public hearing there. But just curious, and Dan Carver, do you know off the top of your hand or off the top of your head what's triggering the nonconformity? Is it the clustering or proximity to schools of which they're locating, or is it that balanced? Do you guys have a general idea as to how that looks?
I believe it's about 70% clustering, maybe 30% schools, just from a real, you know, without going through and actually running the numbers. But it seems like clustering is the larger issue.
Okay, because I mean, just where I live generally, I live in the Fort Lowell Country Club area, just south of Winter Haven there. And just recently, like there's 3 popped up all within, you know, a stone's throw of each other. And it's like, I beg the question of like just driving and observing myself as why do we need so many right here? And why are they going there? And obviously it's demand, they have the right to locate there, etc. But was just curious if there was one that was higher than the other and whether or not we needed to look at that a little bit more closely. So thank you.
Thank you.
So just kind of related to the nonconformity issue, I just want to clarify kind of what that means. I'm not sure if we went over that. Just that, you know, they're still allowed to remain in business there. They just become a legally non-conforming use. The only issue would be is if they wanted to either expand or someone new would want to move in. So the nonconformity would allow for them to still remain in that place as they move forward. If they wanted to expand up to 50%, they'd have to go through a zoning examiner special exception. So there is a process for doing so, but it just makes it more difficult to do so. But that's essentially what that means. I think over time you would start to see them spread out over from those areas where they're currently clustering.
Dan, real quick, when you say that they are new, it's that it was not a smoke shop previously, right? So there's a change of use occurring here.
That's correct. It would be a change of use where one would maybe, you know, a smoke shop would either start up in there or move into one of those spaces. Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Lampo?
Yeah, I just had one last question. So you looked at Tempe, Avondale, and Phoenix. Right. It looks like Tempe and Avondale have similar. It's about 1,300-ish feet distance separation, but only from other smoke shops. in Avondale, and then in Tempe, it's just for schools. Have you found any other municipalities with similar distance separation requirements?
Those were the primary 3 municipalities that we looked at, and based on our geospatial analysis that we just discussed earlier, we felt like this was the best one to proceed. We can certainly go back and look and see if there are similar separation distances for just other smoke shops and schools, and see if there are any additional examples.
I would be interested to see that. Thank
Great.
you.
All right, Commissioner McKenzie?
Yeah, one other thought occurred to me. We define the, what a smoke shop is, but I didn't hear, I guess, a definition of a school. Is that, does this include public, private, and charter schools?
It does. There is a specific layer that we have in map Tucson, and I'll have to go back to the red line ordinance too. And there's a definition in the red line, and I don't remember the exact language, but there's a specific data set that we reference that we would be using for schools.
Yeah, Commissioner McCanty, it's the same that we use elsewhere in the Unified Development Code. It is a K9 or K through 12 public, private, or charter school for that.
Great, thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands up, so I'll go ahead and ask my own question now. Most of my questions have already been answered, but one question I have remaining is I noticed the measurement standard for the 1,000 feet is from the interior suite wall of the smoke shop. Is staff going to have any trouble implementing that standard, trying to figure out where that interior wall is to measure out to the property line of the school?
That is the same standard that we are using currently for marijuana dispensaries, and staff has not had any issues with that, but I can certainly investigate that a little bit more just to confirm that that would be okay with this situation as well.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. I don't see any other hands up. Does anybody else have any last minute questions for staff? Any discussion? All right, seeing no hands going up, I will entertain a motion.
Chair Cassidy, I'll go ahead and make a motion to set the hearing here, or set the agenda item for public hearing as on the date recommended by staff. I'm sorry, I don't have what dates pulled up in front of me, but I make the motion to set it for a public hearing.
Thank you. Motion by Vice Chair Willett. Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. That motion passes unanimously, and we'll move on to agenda item number 4, PDSD staff announcements. Staff, if you want to go ahead and make those announcements.
I don't think we have many announcements this month. We have a number of projects underway. Plan Tucson will be moving into our next phase of outreach this fall, which will lean heavily on working groups comprised of stakeholders from across Tucson on a variety of topics. So we are looking forward to that. And I think several commissioners are planning to participate. So thank you. And we look forward to having your participation, particularly in the land use working group, but other working groups as well.
Great. Thank you, staff. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, future agenda items. Staff?
Yes, so future agenda items, we will have a public hearing for smoke shops on September 13th. On that same date, we will also have a study session on food truck court amendment. And then additionally, we have a plan amendment for the Southeast sub-regional plan that will be coming to you soon, hopefully in September, maybe in October.
All right, thank you for that. Agenda item number 6 is the call to the audience. At this time, I'd like to offer the public an opportunity to speak on any subject that's not listed on the current agenda as a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, would they please raise their hand or speak to let us know? All right, I'm not seeing any hands or hearing any voices, so we'll move on to agenda item number 7, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
There is a
Oh,
member of the
Commissioner.
public with.
Oh,
a-
I'm sorry. Commissioner Hummel, go ahead.
No, I wish I were a commissioner, I think.
I'm
maybe
sorry.
someday,
I don't
but,
have the list in front of me. Go ahead, Mr. Hummel.
Thank you. My name is Brian Hummel. I'm the Arizona and New Mexico Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. We do the advocacy work for the American Cancer Society. We were part of the group providing technical assistance to the youth who brought forward the ordinance that ultimately passed in 2019 that created a tobacco retail license. I wanted to commend the staff for the really good communication and outreach, and would agree on the comments about the presentation. It was very well done. As was mentioned, I think many of the concerns or questions that were brought up by some of the members of the commission, we would have similar questions or concerns regarding the sort of the limitation of just to schools. Many jurisdictions have a requirement for houses of worship, youth, other places where youth congregate. For example, like Boys and Girls Clubs or a YMCA or YWCA. And we would encourage some additional thought around those ideas. And then I believe this probably doesn't fall in the purview of zoning, but another way to help address this issue is to cap the number of permits available in the space. And we would encourage some thought around that as well. But thank you very much for allowing me the time. And again, appreciate the effort by the staff to communicate very thoroughly.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hummel. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? All right, I don't see any more hands going up. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make
I'll
a
move
motion
to
to
it.
adjourn.
I have a motion by Commissioner Ortiz-Pino. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kinney. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Say nay. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, staff and members of the commission.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Bye-bye all.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.